So I pushed off, and the ranger sort of watched me push off, and he was kind of judging me because I was on my own, I think. And then I went to do a roll to make sure it would roll, and I just thought this is going to be incredibly embarrassing. As I've come all the way from England, spoke to this ranger, gone through the checklist, and then just swam straight in front of him. I'm pretty sure he would have been in his right to drag me off the river, but the boat rolled fine. It was just super heavy.
Episode 344, a solo kayaking journey through the Grand Canyon during the winter with Liam Kirkham.
Hey friends, thank you. Thank you for all you do to keep the Adventure Sports Podcast alive and well. You listen to our amazing guests. Thanks for that. You join our Facebook group and you share your adventures. That's awesome. You join our ASP members community for discounts and to support the show. Very cool. You donate to our Patreon site. Right on. But most of all, thank you for believing in the show. Thank you for joining with us to reach others to share the great stuff that adventure sports bring. We believe that adventure sports help people to live richer, more fulfilling lives. We believe that the Adventure Sports Podcast is making a positive impact in the world through physical health, emotional health, environmental health, and relational health. We have set the challenging goal of doubling our listener base by February the 28th. Wow. Really? After nearly 3 years, we want to double the number of listeners in just a few weeks? You bet. And you make it possible because you believe in ASP. Thanks in advance for sharing the dream of a healthier, happier world by telling your friends about the Adventure Sports Podcast. Let's double the good. Together, we can do it.
You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast, brought to you by 180 Tech. We talk with adventurers from around the globe to bring you the inspiration and motivation you need to get started in the outdoors or to keep you moving if you're already there. Now here's your host, Curt Linville.
Hey, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Curt here. I have Liam Kirkham on the line, and I'm excited about this interview. Let me tell you why. We have not done a whole lot of Whitewater interviews on the show yet. We've done several, but it's been a while, and Liam is here to talk kayaking, but not just any kayaking. Liam actually kayaked solo the Grand Canyon in the wintertime. That's pretty crazy. So Liam grew up in the northern part of England, and he lives in England, and he is a kayaking instructor. He also is a kayaking guide in Ecuador during the Northern Hemisphere's winter months. And so he is the kayaking expert who's going to lead us through what whitewater kayaking is all about. I'm excited. Liam, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, man, it's going to be awesome. I think this is going to be a fun topic. Like I said, it's been a while since we talked kayaking or whitewater on the show, so especially kayaking. We've done several river trips and whitewater, like more whitewater rafting type shows.
Okay, yeah.
But it's been a while since we did kayaking. So, let's start just by talking about the sport itself a little bit, if you don't mind. Why did you start kayaking? What does it do for you?
So I think I started kayaking because I was pretty bad at everything else. So when I first got into sort of outdoor stuff, I started climbing. And if you're sort of bad at climbing, you don't get to the top. So that I found that quite frustrating. But on my first river trip, I got to the bottom. I swam 20 times and I was freezing, but I completed it. So I was happy. And I thought, well, I can stick with this. I'm kind of resilient. I can stick with this. And so that hooked me. That I could be okay and finish it. I liked the journey. And then I remember for ages, I think maybe the first year or first 2 years, I'm not sure I did like it. Like I kind of liked it in hindsight. In the moment, I was a little bit scared or cold. But then either the day after or even in the car on the way back, I'd be buzzing, and I thought I kind of enjoyed it in hindsight for the first 2 years. So I just stuck with it, yeah.
So where did you learn to kayak?
So when I was 16, I went to college and I did like an outdoor education program, and sort of 2 or 3 days a week of that would be practical. So they'd take us kayaking, climbing, caving. So they took us to sort of Lake District in northwest England, and we'd we'd go out kayaking 2 or 3 days a week, then climbing 2 to 3 days a week. And like I said, that one just grabbed me. I sort of stuck with that one. Straight away, I sort of knew that was the one I preferred. I really enjoyed it.
Wow. So, I'm going to let you know my ignorance right here. When I think of England, I don't think of Whitewater.
No, we're pretty good at doing things that our country hasn't got lots of. Like we've got, there are mountains here, but we've created a lot of famous mountaineers, and Whitewater in England is a little bit different to the rest of Europe, even in that it's completely rain fed. We don't. So Italy and France and all the places kind of near us rely on that snow melts, but we rely on the rain, which we get a bit of. But it normally means it's in the winter, so it's those short, miserable days where it's cold, damp days. But there's good white water here. It's just little spots of it, and it's all rain dependent. It's here. So
you have to wait for a good rainstorm for it to really load up.
Exactly, yeah. And that can be, being England, can be any time of year, but normally in the winter.
Okay. Well, there's all kinds of kayaking, not just whitewater. And have you done like sea kayaking and stuff like that?
Yeah, I've done bits of sort of open canoeing and sea kayaking and sort of squirt boating, but really whitewater, the river trip from A to B, that's what I really enjoyed. And it didn't ever need to be sort of hard, but just a journey. So I'd rather do 20 miles of a little ripple than spend an hour in really hard surf. I'd rather be on the river.
Well, I'm going to share with you my kayaking history, Liam. Not that anyone really wants to hear it, but it'll help our conversation, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm interested, yeah.
I loved whitewater kayaking, and this was, like 20 years ago when I started. And I went as often as I could, but at the same time that I was taking up whitewater kayaking, my wife and I were starting our family. And so pregnancies and babies and that sort of thing, I didn't get out as often as I wanted to. So my skill just kind of, it plateaued. And so I kayaked for several years, but then one spring we got on a flooded creek, and I got worked. I got worked bad. I had to come out on my boat, complete yard sale, everything scattered everywhere. I even lost my throw rope. There wasn't any way for someone to rescue me. I had to swim through a boulder field. I got out the other side of it, bruised and shaken. And what happened to me was I started thinking about my little kids at home. And I said, you know what? Maybe I'll do this sport again in the future, but I either have to do it a whole lot more to get my skill level up or not do it, because what I'm doing right now is risking their father.
Yeah.
Because I just really got worked that bad. And so I said, okay. So I put the kayak in dry storage and said I'm going to be a dad for a while and maybe rejoin the sport later. And it was because I knew I just didn't have enough time to get my skill level up. So how long did it take you to get your skill level up to the point where you said, oh yeah, I can do this, I feel pretty safe?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I think that happens to a lot of, maybe not always a really bad beatdown, but it is a sport that is, I think, there's certain moments you get past, or you have a sort of like a light bulb moment and you get to a certain standard, and then you jump again in performance and sort of what you can do. They're in this, I think it's quite a steep learning curve, or even like steps when you have this moment of, right, I can do that now and I'm going to move on. So for example, the roll, the moment you've got a pretty good roll, that's a real game changer. Or even before that, the first time when I teach a lot of beginners, the first time they can fall out of their kayak and realize they're not trapped upside down, they suddenly get loads better and they go, okay, I can do this. And then they have their roll and then they're like, okay, I can do this again. And they feel even more confident. And then they have their whitewater roll and it jumps again. But amongst all that in that learning curve, it's really easy to have a sudden sort of bad day and then maybe be put off it. And it's always frustrating when I'm teaching people that might happen. And then for me, like I said, I think I didn't learn to roll until the first 3 years, and that's kind of unusual, I think. So like I said, I think I'm kind of resilient. So I got used to swimming. I got used to being upside down in my boat, and then so when I could roll, the idea of swimming and being upside down was never terrifying to me. I didn't want it, and it can be dangerous at times, but it would never break me. If I had to swim, I would never sort of be really upset or really beat myself, because I'd already had years of it when I first started. So I've been kayaking for like 15 years now, I think. And the first 3 years, I was very bad. And my friends who now don't kayak, actually, that I started with, are very surprised I'm the one who's still kayaking and still doing it, because they just remember me being absolutely awful.
You're being
Yeah.
really candid with us. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
The point at which I quit, I could actually do a hand roll without a paddle. My
Oh,
roll
okay.
in a pool was bomb-proof, but when I was in Whitewater, it was 50-50. I may not make it happen when it was really critical. And so I wasn't quite to the point that I knew that in the middle of a hydraulic, I would be able to pop myself back up. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I was. And that's why I ended up swimming, of course. And something I used to do, Liam, I don't know if you ever tried this, but it sounds like you had a parallel course anyway. I used to leave the boat on the shore and jump in the whitewater and swim it on purpose. And the reason that I would do that is so it didn't make me so nervous then to get in the boat and go have fun. Because if I knew that I could swim it, I knew what's the worst that can happen. Well, I'd come out of my boat and swim it. So that was one way that I started trying to build up my my skill set and my confidence. But maybe swimming a lot can help.
Yeah, I think it's just different for everyone, because and it's so hard to sort of maybe like plan a learning curve for someone, where for me, swimming early and stuff like that, it did sort of help a lot. And when I learned to roll, I never had a transition of, oh, now I can roll on flat. I hope I can roll in white water. I could just I just would be able. I was able to roll in white water and surf. It never sort of had a sort of transition, because I was so used to being upside down that, oh, well, I can roll. I'll just do it again. But for some people, they get a roll in flat water, and then they can roll in a bit of moving water, but not if it's really fast, or maybe it's a bit shallow. So and then I think there's, with all these things, there's a bit of a head game, and so it's a difficult one to get it right. And swimming some rapids, I think, will be fine, but sometimes you definitely don't want to be swimming the rapids just to make sure it's okay.
Right, and not all rapids should be swam,
No.
for sure. I mean, it was usually class 3 or kind of easier class 4. I never swam anything harder than that. So
Yeah.
but
I'm with you. I think people should get immersed in the water early, so they're not always thinking of it as, this is me and my boat on top of the water, and that's good. And when I'm in the water, that's bad. They should blend it a bit more, so they're a bit, hopefully a bit more familiar with the water, and it's not such a punishment when they end up in it, or such a shock.
Yeah, good point. Well, hey, let's do maybe 5 minutes max of kayaking 101. And I mean really the basics, because not everybody has seen a whitewater kayak. So
Okay.
I guess the first thing is, will you describe how a whitewater kayak is different from a flatwater kayak, like an ocean kayak or something?
Okay, so there's sort of a whitewater kayak would be kind of like sort of 8 to 10 foot long, and quite dumpy. Quite a lot. There's kind of different types of whitewater kayaks, but for sort of harder whitewater, it wants to be forgiving, so it's kind of round and it's full, and it's like a little cork. And there's play boats which have got a bit more edges, and they're for tricks and stuff. But for whitewater, it's going to be sort of around 8 foot, 10 foot, with a decent amount of volume for its length, and quite round, and what's going through the water. Whereas a sea kayak or an ocean sort of kayak will be 12, 13, up to 17, 18 foot long, and kind of quite a sharp front, so it glides and cuts through the water. So that's great at going A to B and journeying through flat water, but not maneuverable enough for a river. Whereas a river boat is really maneuverable, but it's a pig to paddle on flat water. It's sluggish, it's slow, it's twitchy, but it really comes to life when it's on some moving water. So 8 to 10 foot, plastic, kind of roundish, soft edges, nice shape like that would be a good whitewater boat.
Okay, so when you sit in it, describe the position of your feet and your knees so people get a feel for how you control the thing.
So, like I said, I've been kayaking 15 years and a lot, and I've got no muscles in my arms. I can't do a pull-up. I can't do a push-up. So it doesn't come from, and I'm not even joking. My girlfriend's looking at me across the room now. She knows it's true. But so you're very connected to the boat. So when you move your stomach and your bum and your core, the boat's feeling that, it's responding to that. So you're quite snug in the kayak, and you've got kind of like a frog-legged position inside the kayak. It's kind of you're sat in it, your knees are touching against, or your thighs are touching against thigh pads, and your feet are on a plate at the bottom. And if you sat on one on the floor, you should be able to shake it and the boat will move with you. You're not just rattling around inside the boat. You and the boat will start to move.
So you and the boat are connected. It's almost like you're one unit.
Yeah, you're definitely connected. Yeah. your knees are like splayed out to the side. And if you wanted to get out and just say it was upright, you'd bring your knees together and you step out of that hole. But when you sit into it, you push your knees out to the side and you're locked into the boat.
Okay. Well, then let's talk just briefly about the gear that you use besides the boat, the paddle, the spray skirt, maybe a paddle jacket, a wetsuit, a helmet, that kind of stuff. What do you think's required?
You want to be warm and comfortable, and especially in England, that's what's hard off the bat. You don't get many nice days. So like all these things, kayaking, climbing, hill walking, mountaineering, if you're warm and comfy, the rest is a bit easier. So you want some decent, maybe neoprene wetsuit or fleece with a nice waterproof jacket that stops the water getting in there, so you can enjoy it without worrying about getting cold too easy. And then definitely like a buoyancy aid or a PFD or a life jacket, we call them, something. So if you do end up in the water, you don't have to do much to float. It's get lots of buoyancy and it's bringing you to the surface and looking after you.
So several episodes back, I did a kind of a review of adventure sports to try to determine how dangerous these sports really were. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't surprised by any sport except for kayaking, and here's why. I knew that adventure sports were actually far safer than they feel for the most part, and especially with training in the right gear. You can do them correctly, and you can be stupid and do bad things too, and that was kind of the main thrust of the show. But I was comparing the adventure sports to the danger of driving a car, so I looked up all the statistics online and that kind of stuff. The one thing that really surprised me was that kayaking was a lot safer than I thought it was. And the reason I say that, of all the adventure sports I've done, kayaking is the one that scared me the most. And I always told my kids, I said, that's the most dangerous thing I've ever done. And when I actually looked at the stats, it's not the most dangerous thing I've ever done. Snow skiing probably is.
Okay, yeah.
So it surprised me.
That perception.
Yeah, on average, it's the alpine skiers that get in the most trouble, much more so than kayakers. But my perception of kayaking was I'm upside down. I have a limited time to hold my breath. Rocks are banging me in the head. I could get trapped in this boat. So, there was that kind of edgy, if I can't get out of the boat and get my head above water, that's the end of the game, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of binary, it's on or off. You're above the water or you're below the water. I think that's what scared me. I'm a solid swimmer. I swam a lot growing up. I spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours every week in the water. So water doesn't bother me. It was just something about being in the boat that made it hard. So did you get to the point where you got past all of that?
I didn't have it strongly. So I teach a lot of beginners, and I definitely see it a lot in people. And I see people being very nervous or very sort of scared of it. And I think it's completely justified. Like I say to people straight away, I think when I'm teaching a beginner, I definitely want to kind of, remind them that I know it's not easy, because we are land mammals. So being sat in a boat with a spray deck strapped to us is kind of bizarre. And it's a lot. I have people tell me they dream about it, and being underwater and things like that. So there is maybe something kind of quite ancient there that people are trying to fight and don't like it. But I never really had it that strong. But it is something I see people fighting all the time. And even when they come in the shop and they haven't started kayaking, well, I'll start talking to them and they'll have a story, or they'll tell me their fear quite early. And that's quite common. But spray deck, like cockpits on kayaks now, are often so open. So not that long ago, they were quite a lot smaller. They're so open now that if you were to turn one upside down and I lifted them above my head, they'd have trouble staying in the boat, unless they wanted to. They could slip out of it pretty easily, and that's even easier when in the water. What I keep seeing all the time, which I'm always kind of amazed by, because I'm terrified I'm pretty bad on a bike, and I've skied twice, and I found that quite scary. But I can see some pretty big wipeouts in kayaking on the river. It'd be pretty big waves and rapids, and the boat flips, and it looks quite chaotic. And they get to the end, and they swim into the eddy, and they're completely, untouched. They're fine. They're a bit shook up maybe, but then you see someone fall, clipped in on their road bike, and they can break their collarbone. Like it's surprisingly soft sometimes. Kayaking, it can look pretty chaotic and big, but sometimes it can be softer than it looks as well, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And it's just funny that was the one sport. And the thing is, I do free diving, skin diving, water skiing, scuba diving. None of that stuff ever bothered me. but for some reason kayaking got my attention. So, but that's just me. Everyone's different, right?
I heard a stat recently, and I'm not sure if it's true, so I'll have to Google check it later. But I heard a fact recently that more cyclists drown in England than kayakers. So I'm not sure if that's true, but there's lots of towpaths along the side of the canals and the rivers here, and there's also a few pubs maybe, and people are cycling back and fall into the water. So there's probably a lot more cyclists as well. So I'll have to check my facts. But I think it's a pretty safe sport, but there are dangers. But the one thing is, I think with maybe biking or skiing or swimming is you can stop often. Whereas I think the whitewater thing, people worry because if they suddenly stop in the middle of the river doesn't realize, it keeps pushing you. So that kind of lack of control, I think, sometimes throws people as well. They can't just press the pause button very easily.
Well, I think that you're right about that. And I have to say, now that I've talked about how challenging kayaking has been for me, it's also probably my top 2 or 3 favorite sports I've ever done. It is so much fun. Our deal was that we used to like the idea that we could ski the snow, and then in the spring we could kayak the snow once it melted, and we had a year-round sport. And sometimes we'd kind of cross the seasons, and we'd find a mountain. We would slide down the mountain in our kayaks and land in the river, and keep going. And so it was fun,
brilliant.
to do that kind of stuff too. There's so much cool stuff you can do.
Yeah, with kayaking, I think there's a massive spectrum. There's like you said, there's you can have a pretty gentle day on a really calm day on the ocean, or you can have some pretty hard white water, or you can have a gentle bit of white water on a nice deep stream. There is a huge spectrum of super easy, friendly, relaxing stuff to pretty scary stuff, I think. So big spectrum to choose from or aim for.
It's official. Winter has arrived, and Bent Gate Mountaineering is prepared to help you get ready for your epic winter. Come check out the latest in alpine touring, telemark, NTN, and splitboarding gear. They have brands like Black Crows, DPS, Dynafit, G3, Icelantic, K2, Technica Blizzard, Arc'teryx, Mammoth, Solomon, Volley, Neversummer, Jones, and BCA. And you do need to be safe out there. Bent Gate has the latest in avalanche safety gear. They have beacons, airbags, shovels, and probes, and they're ready to help you educate yourself on snow safety. They also rent out gear, so you can get your skis and your boots there, as well as your avalanche safety equipment. What's more, they also have free demo ski days at local resorts, so you can try out the latest gear. Now, how much fun does that sound? So swing by Bent Gate in Golden, Colorado, or go to bentgate.com to find your new gear, as well as to get updates on all of their events. Well, and speaking of big spectrum, Grand Canyon, wintertime, solo, that sounds pretty big to me. What was that about? So, first of all, how hard was it to be able to put together that trip?
There's a couple of barriers in the way. So getting on the Grand Canyon, kayaking the Grand Canyon, you need to win a weighted lottery. So you need to get a permit, and the way you get that permit is you apply, and that with some sort of dates that you would like, and then it gets pulled out of a lottery if you get those dates or not. And if you don't get them the first year, then next year, as I understand it, your name goes in the hat twice. So each year you don't get it, you've got more chance of getting it the next year. So there's that. That's the first sort of obstacle to get, go on the Grand Canyon.
Wow. So you won the lottery. How long did it take you?
My first year, and I'd already started planning the trip before I won it. So I was kind of cocky or daydreaming or just really hopeful. But it was on my first year applying for a permit, I got it. But and that's the reason it ended up in the winter. You've got a much better chance of getting the lottery because so many fewer people go through those winter dates. A lot of people choose like the April, May, and the sort of September, October, and also the summer. But those shoulder. But the winter, a lot less people go for them. So I kind of edged my bets and chose all sort of dates in December. and then just lucked out and got that email saying you've got a permit. So I was super lucky, but also kind of tactical with when I wanted to go.
So when was this that you did it? What year?
So this was almost a year. I just got off a year ago to the day. So December 2nd, 2016, I got on the river. I pushed off, I launched.
December 2nd. And how long did it take you to do the full run?
12 days I kayaked for. So I was kayaking for 12 days, and it's 226 miles. And people have done it in sort of a month and taken their sweet time and gone for hikes and walks. And I think the record's under 24 hours, maybe. So people have really blasted it as well, or hammered it. But I just took 12 days, which is kind of nice, sort of gentle, not pushing myself every day, and time to look around. I didn't want to rush it.
Now, were you with a guide, a raft that had gear and stuff like that, or were you self-supported?
I was self-supported, so it was me and my kayak, loaded with everything I needed, and some things I didn't need. But the national park ask you or check when you get on that you've got certain stuff. They've got certain stuff that you have to take. So a ranger checks you in and goes through your kit, and there's certain things that I wouldn't have brought, but you've got to get that checklist and got to get through it. So it was me, my kayak, and all the things I needed, and some of the things I didn't need.
Okay, so did you have to use a different style of kayak just to carry all the gear? I mean, 12 days, that's a lot of food.
Yeah, it's kind of an unusual kayak. It's what they call a crossover kayak, I guess. It's a hybrid. It's not as long as a sea kayak, and but it's not as it's a lot longer than a whitewater boat. So it was like 12 foot, and it was like a whitewater shape, but stretched out. If you can imagine, kind of scaled and dragged out. So it was a lot longer than a normal whitewater boat, but kind of with a familiar shape. And then it had one hatch in the back, which allowed me to get some kit in the back. A sea kayak would often have a few hatches. So this was like a stretched out whitewater boat with a hatch. So it's kind of a different boat, but it felt familiar-ish.
Ish.
Yeah.
Well, it could not have turned as easily and been as sporty as what you were accustomed to, especially with weight in it. Did you feel like that was holding you back, or was it okay?
No, absolutely. It was a strange thing. So I bought I knew the kayak I was going to borrow out in the States. So I flew out there and I rented this kayak, and I knew which one I was renting. So I bought it over here in the UK and was playing around with it and got used to it. But I never really fully loaded it. And then the first time I fully loaded it and paddled it was on the Grand Canyon. And I pushed it off, and it was super heavy. Like, I don't know how much it weighed, but I couldn't lift the thing for sure. So I'd have to drag it onto beaches. But so I pushed off, and the ranger sort of watched me push off, and he was kind of judging me because I was on my own, I think. And then I went to do a roll to make sure it would roll, and I just thought this is going to be incredibly embarrassing. As I've come all the way from England, spoke to this ranger, gone through the checklist, and then just swam straight in front of him. I'm pretty sure he would have been in his right to drag me off the river, but the boat rolled fine. It was just super heavy. And then the first few hours, it's kind of flat water, and I definitely felt it straight away that this boat is hard work. And it was just slow. On the first rapid, I noticed it took a lot more effort than I thought it would to get across the flow, and so I had to sort of just judge it and put this extra sort of power in, and take things a lot earlier than I would have normally done. So looking at the rapid a long way before, and start making my moves a lot earlier to help get the boat where it needed to be.
Well, let's go through the classes of Whitewater real fast so we can talk specifically about what the Grand Canyon was like for you at that time of the year. So a class 1 means there's a current, essentially. It's pretty much just frog water, right? Class 2 is a stronger current, and it's pretty much the limit for an open canoe, because class 3 can swamp an open canoe. When you get into class 3, that's when you have bigger rapids, and that's really where kayaking starts to be fun, for me anyway.
Yeah.
And then they define... Class 4 is now you've got bigger rapids. It may be difficult to do a self-rescue if you come out of your boat. That sort of thing, you're getting pretty big. Class 5 self-rescue may not be possible. And Class 6 is, well, that's almost a suicide mission as far as I'm concerned. People boat it, but they're amazing when they do. So how would you adjust my scale there?
The funny thing, is there's different styles of each class as well. So in England, we've got these kind of small rivers, and they're rocky, and they might say class 4, but it'd be a kind of rocky, technical kind of class 4 when you're dodging rocks quite quickly or scraping over them. But the Grand Canyon's maybe sort of class 3+, 4, but there's nothing like it in England, for example. It's huge, big waves, and though they're still on that same class, that class has got its own spectrum as well. So it's quite a different field to any UK kayaking, and likewise, I think if maybe some. So I've got a bunch of friends who learnt to kayak in Nepal, and if they came over here in England and kayak, they'd probably find it pretty tough. They'd hit every rock and be surprised why we were kayaking these tiny little creeks and rivers and rocks. So it's a different type of class 4, I think, out there in the Grand Canyon 3-4, but it's a big standing, huge waves, but sometimes not overly technical, just kind of big, soft giants sometimes.
So had you done big water like that before, or was the Colorado through the Grand Canyon kind of a first?
I've done some big water in other places, like in Ecuador and Idaho, and I actually paddled the Grand Canyon a couple of years before this. I worked as a safety boater on one trip, so I had done it once before in September. So I did know it, or I thought I knew it. I kind of saw it through new eyes when I was on my own. It felt quite different, but I was familiar with what the water should be like. But I think it's just important to say there's kind of different classes of different types of the same class. So there can be class 4, creaky or rocky or big volume. There's differences there.
And that's a good point. Most of my boating was it was creek boating, and it was pretty bony, lots of rocks to work around. And in a way, I think that might be more difficult. You really have to be on your game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. On the Grand Canyon, you could maybe be 10 foot, off the place you want to be and still be like online, kind of in the right area-ish. But on creek boating, on the rocky stuff, sometimes you're talking about I want to be 3 inches to the right of that rock, aiming left. It's kind of quite narrow margins and quite creaky. But the big waves on the Grand Canyon, if you are in the wrong place, they're big.
Wow. So how did it feel once you got your roll and you knew you were continuing on into the Grand Canyon? What were your emotions at that moment, right then, when you said, "Okay, it's really happening"?
It kept flicking like a metronome. I was swinging between being very excited, and I'd been planning it for 2 years, so I was really excited to be there. And I'd slept on the banks the night before, and I'd watched it, so I was super excited. And then kind of almost a bit of a sort of deep feeling in my stomach of nerves, I guess, and when I was thinking about when I was kayaking, I wasn't like, oh, I'm nervous of this, but I could just feel this kind of maybe even loneliness, a little bit like, well, this is actually happening now. It was a bit surreal.
So I'm not someone who likes to do adventure sports alone very much. Travis, my co-host, he's just the opposite. He loves that alone time. And there's everybody, the full spectrum between us. Where would you place yourself?
I hadn't done much alone stuff before, but I definitely want to do more now. So I think I do like it. But the reason it came to me being alone was I can be pretty disorganized sometimes, and maybe sort of avoid some responsibilities. So I wanted the whole trip to be on my shoulders. So it wasn't just like the kayaking; it was getting the whole trip together, figuring out all the logistics, all the kit. Just having all on my shoulders and being like, okay, well, this is all mine. So everything I got from it, everything I put in was mine to return as well. Like it was nice to have all that on my shoulders, because at the end of the trip, when it had gone pretty well and a bit scary at times, it had quite a deep feeling. It was it was a great feeling, and I think because it was such a great feeling, it's because I'd all relied on me. I had to really work hard for it to come off.
Yeah, I can imagine how good that would feel, to say I did it.
Yeah, exactly, and that was just getting it together, getting it organized. Even just 10 hours on a plane to America thinking, why am I going to the Grand Canyon to paddle it on my own, was kind of a mental struggle, trying to tune into the movies. I started lying on the plane. People asked me, oh, what are you doing? And I just lied. I didn't mention the Grand Canyon because then they'd ask me lots of questions and I'd start getting myself nervous again. So I just said I was going to visit family.
So when you really got there, when push came to shove and you're paddling in, you kind of vacillating back and forth between that excitement and some of that dread, like, oh man, what's going to happen next? So let's say you're 3 days in. Then how did you feel?
I felt great. Like I was into the swing of it. I mean, I had a couple of highs and lows. I think it was even sooner than sort of 3 days. I think the moment I realized I couldn't paddle back upstream, I enjoyed that kind of forced commitment, that kind of, we're on it now. In the same way that when you get on a roller coaster and the guy clicks you in and the cart starts moving, you can't really do much about what's happening
just
now.
Hang on for the ride.
Yeah. here we go, we're in it now, so off we go. So I enjoyed the moment I got around the corner and couldn't get back upstream. I didn't want to go back, but then I sort of just took it on. I was like, well, here we go. So I was really excited, and I got into a bit of routine, and I enjoyed being on my own, and I never actually really felt lonely. I just felt very like it was quite intense. Every decision was quite intense, and every sort of thing you did, and every beautiful view and every big rapid was just doubled in its experience. It all felt quite full on.
Wow. Well, the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon is a flow-controlled river. There are dams upstream from it now, so I don't know what to expect in December. What were the flow rates like?
And I've got no idea either, and this is one of those things I was talking about the responsibility. I remember thinking, if it's absolutely huge, I probably won't. If it's absolutely huge or it's snowing at the get-on, which it was unlikely, then I'm not going to get on. But then apart from that, so I kind of made it a binary decision. I just thought it's either going to be low, medium, or high, or undoable. And the moment it was undoable, that was the only sort of level I cared about really. But so I can't remember what volume I paddled it at. I just, but I knew it was a volume I was happy with.
So it was pretty big then.
It was big. And there'd been, so it's dam controlled, like you said. So it was kind of known quantity, but I wasn't beforehand on purpose. I wasn't sort of looking at certain levels and which rapids are harder at these levels and which rapids are easier at these levels. I just wanted to sort of deal with it when I got in there, knowing at least it wasn't super big. I wasn't going to get on if it was a massive flow.
Well, that's a big river, man. It's a large river and solo and in the wilderness. I mean, there's nothing there. You are down deep inside of this canyon, the largest canyon on Earth, and it's just you. So was that intimidating, or did you really enjoy it?
Again, it probably brought me back to my first sort of few years of kayaking. Like when I said earlier, my first few sort of years of kayaking I almost enjoyed it in hindsight, and I was definitely buzzing for months, weeks. I mean, it's a year to the day. I'm still buzzing from it now. And in the moment, I was just dealing with it and getting through it and enjoying it, but quite focused. I wasn't being too flippant. So I did enjoy it, but definitely looking back on it as an experience, I valued it. But I'm not sure if I enjoyed it in the present when it was actually happening. I was just doing it.
So what was the weather like? I mean, December, it can be cold.
Yeah, I was super lucky. That was one of the things I was really worried about because, you very unlikely, but you could get snow at the put on, but that would be very unlikely. But it was just blue skies every day, super sunny. But at night or when the sun went behind the canyon walls, kind of like 4:30, it was cold. So it was down jackets, gloves. The first couple of nights I got some frost and like a bit of ice in my water bottle, so it's pretty cold. But on the daytimes, I was just so pleased. I could sit on the beach in a pair of shorts and sunbathe at lunch. Yeah, which I was kind of couldn't believe. And then I'd be sat there reading my book, and then I'd watch the sun just go bloop, dip away, and I'd get my down jacket, my hat, and be completely wrapped up for the next sort of 12 hours or whatever it was. It was pretty cold at night.
Well, dry air, huge temperature swings, early shade, like you're saying, because of the canyon walls. But wow, so what was the scenery like?
It is spectacular, and I was naive to how spectacular it was. I got to say, like I'd obviously heard of the Grand Canyon, and lots of people I knew had been there, but I kind of just thought they were hyping it up until I went there the first time, and I was kind of blown away by how incredibly grand the Grand Canyon is. It is otherworldly, big, huge red cliff rocks, different rock types that I'm not smart enough to know the difference of, but just you can see them and you can feel like you're going through all these different types of geology and ages, and it just looks ancient and like it's like a scene from Mars. And then there's this big, huge, beautiful river in the middle of it, and little pockets of green every now and then. But it's a wild place, and coming all the way from Little England, it does look very, very grand.
Well, how did you find the scenery in the American West? I mean, that's vastly different than England as well.
Yeah, kind of intimidating almost. It's so grand, it's so big and wild and massive that and so just space with nothing in it for such massive spaces. Almost intimidating to how wild it was. But then when I was on the river, I wasn't thinking about how wild it was. I was just thinking this corridor is kind of mine, and this is the only bit I've got to sort of worry and think about. The Grand Canyon, the river of the Colorado is the only bit I've got to worry about. But just incredibly beautiful, but kind of intimidating in its scale.
Mm.
You know, we might be smack dab in the middle of winter these days, but spring is really just right around the corner. Make sure you've got one of our lightweight camp stoves ready to go in your pack for when the weather starts turning warmer. Both the 180 stove and the 180 flame are designed to burn the abundant wood fuels you find on the ground instead of requiring you to haul in heavy, messy camp fuels. Take a minute to head on over to our site at www.180tack.com to check out these American-made stoves that are built to last. You'll be helping us, and you'll be helping the Adventure Sports Podcast. Thanks, guys.
Well, how about some stories about the trip? We kind of got all the parameters and the descriptions, but tell us about a really good day on this trip so that we can kind of get a feel for what it's like.
So despite sort of being down there, going on my own, I did bump into a couple of groups down there. And one of my absolute highs was, so I didn't really kayak with anyone. I passed two groups and I shared one camp with one other group. And that was a real high because it was about halfway through the trip and I'd pulled up onto this beach on my own again, and it was kind of cold and tired. And I set this tiny little fire up, and then a group caught up with me. So I think I saw three groups down there, and this was a group I hadn't seen before. So it'd been a few days since I'd seen anyone, and they said, "Oh, can we camp here?" And of course I was, "Yeah, sure you can." I wasn't being a purist. I didn't need to be on my own, but so I said, "Yeah, come on in." And they were kind enough to ask, and they had a big group of them. I think it was like 20 from sort of California, Colorado, a whole mix. And because they were a raft supported trip, they had all the luxuries. So they had a toilet, a groover, which was nice, with a seat, which was rare for me. They had loads of food, which they kindly cooked for me. They had beer, which I had no room for, and I enjoy a beer, so I was very grateful for a beer. They even had a spare chair, and they were just so kind to me and talking to me, and they just kind of wrapped me into their group. So they'd been a group of 16 for a few days, and to add someone to their dynamic was kind of really nice of them. So that was really cool meeting them, and it was kind of a nice little punctuation in the middle of being on my own for so long, to have a little bit of such a friendly group to meet. So that was a great moment. And then each day, at the end of every day, I would have definitely like a moment of buzz where I'd be, right, well, I've done the river for today, now I'm just camping. And that would be a really nice moment where I'd kind of self-congratulate myself for having, choosing good lines, not swimming, having a good day, and then just sit down on the beach and have nothing to do but just kind of eat and read and just look around. And that was a really special time at the end of every day, when the kind of hard bit was done. I wouldn't look at the guidebook for tomorrow. I would worry about that tomorrow. So I just had these few hours of eating and just enjoying the beaches every night.
So don't look at tomorrow. Just enjoy what you've done that day. I like that. That's a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, tomorrow was coming, so I may as well look at it tomorrow. Otherwise, it might have filtered into my dreams and worried about the rapids the next day. So I definitely started falling into one of those patterns that wasn't pre-planned, but I'd wake up and I'd look at my notebook and be like, right, these are the rapids between me and the next where I want to sleep, so 20 miles ish, and how am I going to deal with those? And then when I'd done those, I wouldn't think about tomorrow until I woke up and had my breakfast, and so I could have that kind of free time in the evening without worrying about it.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. Really good idea. So about 20 miles a day. How long did that take?
Some days I'd fly through it, but I think so. Maybe I'd sort of paddle for sort of 6 hours, maybe a day, or 5 hours. But I would go for little hikes and walks, and sometimes I'd paddle hard, and sometimes I'd just float and sort of lie back in my boat and look at the sky. The one thing about being on your own is I got lost a bunch of times, which sounds silly because you're on a river, you shouldn't really get lost. But because I'd be daydreaming, I'd sort of lose track of where I was, and then be like, well, which rapid's that? And because of the scale was just so huge, I'd be looking around thinking, well, which valley is that coming in there? And a couple of times I definitely overshot things one day I overshot something by 10 miles. I just kept paddling, looking for this camp, and I must have passed it, because when I finally did figure out where I was 10 miles past where I was supposed to be. So
Wow.
some days I had some, yeah, I know. I was just looking for this beach, like this beach should be so obvious, and it must have been not very obvious, or I was daydreaming, and I have no one else to check with, or no one else to sort of talk to about it. So I just kept going, and then realized, God, I must be past it. And when I finally found out where I was 10 miles past it.
So maybe you did a 30-mile day that day then.
Yeah, exactly, which kind of was a nice little thing, because the next day I woke up and thought, well, I've only got 10 miles to do today. So that was it was nice, and I could get away with these mistakes because they were all on my shoulders. No one else was going to get angry with me or frustrated or tired. And that was the nice thing about being on your own. It was your decisions, they were your mistakes, they were your highs, they were your lows. It was kind of nice to have it all on your shoulders.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Well, I want to hear about one of the more challenging aspects of the trip, when something didn't go as planned.
So I rolled once on the whole trip, which kind of shook me up, because it was a real silly moment. It wasn't the hardest rapid, and I was just kind of charging into it, and I think I might have subconsciously, I'm not even sure if I've even thought about this till I'm talking to you, I kind of might have been playing to my own GoPro a little bit. I was like trying to make the line look good. So the first time I wasn't on my own, the first time I was thinking about my camera, I completely messed up and hit this wave and capsized. And that moment seemed to take forever. I felt like I've never thought about my roll happened instantly like it normally does, but I definitely felt like another level of thinking about it. Like, I better make this roll the best roll I've ever done, like no doubt perfect. Try and remind myself of every little textbook thing in that 1 second, and that was okay in the moment. But then I was frustrated with myself for about an hour after that. I'd let that kind of slip. I'd let my guard down and made a bit of a stupid mistake. And then the other one was I decided to walk one rapid. So I got to Lava, which is one of the bigger ones on the river, and I was pretty tired by the time I got there. And so my boat I couldn't lift, which I hadn't thought about. So each time I'd have to find somewhere to put my boat. It couldn't be like a ledge. It would have to be as like inclining beach where I could drag my kayak up, because I couldn't lift the weight of it. So I found this beach which wasn't very nice and easy to get onto, and then I scrambled across some rocks, and I went to go look at this rapid called Lava, which took about 20 minutes, half an hour to get on top of a bit of a hill and look at it. And it's a big old rapid. And a couple of years before, when I'd absolutely messed it up. Like, I didn't swim, but I took a horrible line down it and rolled, and everyone had a bit of a giggle. I did impressions later at camp. So the couple of years before, I'd had this memory of not making it look very pretty, and that was with a good team of people. So I sort of sat there for a while, and I think in the first sort of 30 seconds, 40 seconds, I realized I was going to walk it, but I sat there for a little bit longer, and then decided to walk the rapid, which was hard work. So the rapid, if I'd done it well, would have taken me 35, 40 seconds to get to the bottom. But to portage it, I had to paddle my boat across and then unload it. And I had no kind of decent sized bag inside my kayaks. All the little bits, the stoves, the boilers, the spare clothes, all the little bits, I had to take those out my boat and walk them down the side of the rapid, and did about 10 sort of shuttles of carrying it back and forth. And like I said, it was hot and I was in a dry suit, so I was sweating and maybe a little bit dehydrated. I was sort of stumbling around and sort of taking all my stuff. And it took me about an hour and a half to portage this whole rapid. And I was just dripping in sweat, carried my boat when it was finally empty, and then repacked it. And then I just sat on a rock and opened a jar of Nutella and just dipped my hand in and started eating a whole jar of Nutella with my hand. I was so hungry and so sort of, and that was kind of, it wasn't so much a tough decision, but it was slightly like 80% happy I did it and 20% kind of frustrated that I didn't kayak it. But it was a tough call, and it was a tough hour and a half portage to do what was quite a short rapid.
So if you were sitting at the top of that rapid right now in the same circumstance, would you make the same decision?
Yeah, I'm walking it. I think that I was confident. I mean, that's it. If I was confident in the moment, that was the right decision. I've got to be confident in it now when I'm sat at my desk in a nice warm house. So that last year, Liam made the right decision. I think even if I had done it perfectly, I wasn't 100% happy. So even if I had done it well, I probably would have got to the bottom of it and gone, well, you didn't think you were going to do it well. So, if you I couldn't picture myself doing it very well. And I like this quote, which is, never put your body somewhere your mind hasn't been. And I sat up there for a while picturing it. I just couldn't picture myself doing it very well. So for whatever reason, I got my stuff and I walked around it, and the disappointment lasted a couple of minutes after the rapid, and then I was on to the next one.
Wow.
But that was kind of tough, yeah.
Let's talk about that quote just a minute. Don't put your body where your mind hasn't been.
Yeah.
So if you can't visualize it, if you can't picture it, then you have to kind of take pause and say, wait a minute, what am I doing here?
Exactly. This isn't a game of sort of chance or fluke. I get around rapids and that my friends telling me the line of, and I sort of deal with them. But when it was just you on your own, if I couldn't picture it going well, it wasn't a time to be sort of just, I'll just give it a whirl and see what happens. It was a time to sort of take stock and see what I wanted to do about it. And I think the first video that played in my head, so I got to the top of the rapid, and the first kind of imaginary line was me screwing it up. So I thought, well, that's kind of a hard memory to overwrite. So I just chose not to. But I do think about that in kayaking quite a lot. And when I'm guiding or teaching, and people say, oh, I think I can make it, and I'll probably make it. Oh, I'll be okay. I just kind of think at a certain level, you've got to start thinking a bit more positively and being confident in your lines and your decisions. So I tried to practice what I preach and decided to walk it.
That is so true. And the opposite is also true. I remember when I was kind of a novice downhill skier, and I was on a pretty extreme double black, and it was beating me up. And I was sitting on the snow just trying to gather my thoughts, and a man skied up to me, and he said, if you can think it, you can do it. And then he skied off.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's right. And that's kind of a theme throughout all of adventure sports. If you can think it and you know how it's going to go, you can visualize it, you get that confidence, then you're going to do it. But if you can't think it, you better start measuring the situation a little bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that's so true. And there's another one. It's like to be good, you've got to be relaxed, but you can't relax until you're good. And that's another difficult paradox that always turns up in these outdoor sports. Like, you can't just say to someone, oh, relax. You've actually got to be relaxed. You can't just say the words, I'm relaxed, and then that play a part in it. You've got to sort of feel relaxed and feel that you can do it, not just say the lines. You've got to believe the lines.
Yeah, and I find that for me with rock climbing above all else, if I can't relax, I might as well go home.
Yeah.
If I have the right mental state, I'm going to have a blast. But if I'm in one of those mental states where I can't ease into it, I mean, you're always excited, but if I can't just feel that, well, just being in the groove, if I can't get there, then it's like, well, another day will be better then, Yeah.
And that's what I felt like. I was at the top of that rapid and I thought, well, this is a holiday after all, or it's, I've got nothing to prove and I've got no reason to do it, and I definitely just don't feel that groove right now. So that's the thing that's telling me. So I let that conversation sort of win that time.
Yeah, and I applaud you for that. One of my sayings that my kids hear over and over and over again from me is, be safe first and have fun second, and have a blast.
Yeah.
But make sure that
have
you
a
come
blast.
back
I love
to do
that.
it another day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Be safe first, because that's what matters. We got to make sure that we do these things in a way that allows us to enjoy them for years and years to come.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, good call. I think, if that's the way that you felt about that rapid, then you definitely did the right thing.
Yeah, and I think from beginner level to being okay in a kayak or pretty good, then that's a pretty important lesson. So I tried to apply it even in that moment of I planned it for 2 years. I really wanted to do it. I was on my own. This is the whole point of the trip. It wasn't that. So it was I had to definitely apply that lesson consciously.
So you had seen the rapid. You said it was lava, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
you had seen it 2 years prior. It was probably the crux of the trip that haunted you for 2 years as you're thinking about this.
Yeah,
you think that made it bigger than life?
I just remember my friends laughing about how bad my line was 2 years before, and they were completely right to laugh. I really did a bad job of it the first time I did it, so I just kind of had that hanging over me. So it was it was an old friend popping up when I saw that rapid. I kind of immediately had that feeling of, this is how I thought I'd feel.
So on day 12, you finally get to the end, and it's time to take the gear out for the last time. How did you feel about that?
Wasn't happy. If I could have teleported back to the top, I would have pressed the button. I would have carried on going. It was sad for it to come to an end. Yeah, I was looking forward to a beer and some different food, but otherwise I would have liked to carry on going. Yeah.
Well, do you think that had you kept going, it would have gotten easier and easier for you emotionally and mentally to say, yeah, I've got this?
Yeah, I think like the definitely by then the pattern was set, and I knew what I liked to do in the morning. I knew how I kind of what time I wanted to eat at night, how I was going to feel, where all my kit fitted in my room, into my boat, into my room. Let's call it my room, into my kayak. So I had this pattern set, and I was just really enjoying that way of life of waking up. There was only one direction to go, floating down it or paddling down it, eating, and then just repeat. I really liked that pattern.
Mm. You said at the beginning of the program that for you it's as much about the journey as it is about the whitewater and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There are a lot of rivers in this world, and ones that don't require a lottery to pull a permit. So do they call to you?
Yeah, and I don't know what it is, but there was when I was sort of thinking about what I wanted to do, the Grand Canyon kind of floated to the top of my mind and then stayed there, and I couldn't really shake it. So I couldn't get it out of my head. So even if I hadn't got that permit that year, I would think I would have kept on trying for it to do it, because it kind of got lodged in something that I wanted to do. Mm. But the next sort of I'm still thinking about now what river I'd like to do next. Nothing's sort of floated to the top of my mind, but I'm sure it will do, and then it'll stick there pretty definitely.
Mm. Well, what about Ecuador? So you are a guide leading kayaking trips in Ecuador. Amazing. We could do a whole show on that, and we've already burned through a whole show on the Grand Canyon. So just give us the highlights. Around. What is it like?
It's brilliant. So Ecuador is a very different style of paddling, and I work for a company out there who've been operating there for a long time, since 1993, and the guys who run it wrote the guidebook on kayak in Ecuador. So they're a great company to work for, and it's my winter. It's nice to get away in my winter and head to Ecuador either before Christmas or after Christmas, and be walking around in shorts and t-shirts and kayaking in just a rash vest. That's quite a luxury for me.
Mm. So the people that go down there to take that trip, do they have to have a skill set before they go, or is it more of a novice trip?
No, they're often kayakers that are pretty good already, and either they want 7 days of really good kayaking for their holiday, or they want to maybe improve that week. But they're normally a majority of our sort of guests are class 3, class 4 paddlers, or maybe we do some sort of class 2 and class 3. But I'd say the majority is sort of 3, 4. And they're there to either get quality kayaking, or maybe to sort of, like you were talking about, that I think that plateau does appear in people's kayaking every now and then, and they might be at a point where they go, I just want to step it up a little bit with the hand and improve just a little bit more, so I can enjoy kayaking in a different part of the world or to a different level, or so they're there to improve or just have a really good time.
Right on. Well, what about Ecuador itself? Do you like the country and the landscape?
I do. So it's pretty much like bang on the equator. So depending on what height you're at, kind of depends what plants and animals you're seeing, and that's really cool. So you can be in sort of cloud forest in a full length jacket, a little bit chilly in the mist, and then you can go 2.5 hours down the hill and you're in a rash vest. It's really hot. There's a whole different feel to the climate and all the trees and the plants and animals, and it just feels very different 2.5 hours sort of down the hill, just depending on what elevation you're at. So that's really cool.
Neat stuff. Well, Liam, what do you say to people when they ask you about kayaking? Is it a sport worth doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm a one-trick pony. It's the only thing I'm sort of half okay at, and I think it's an incredible way to travel and to see the planet. I don't think, you don't have to kayak it, but to see the Grand Canyon in its glory, I'm pretty sure you've got to see it from the river, whether it's a raft or a kayak. But I think traveling by river is a beautiful way to travel, and I think going to other countries to experience their rivers, and it goes through villages, it goes through mountains, just traveling by the river in a kayak or a raft or a canoe is something that people should look into if it appeals to them.
I agree completely. When you're on a river, man, it changes everything. I love the rhythm of the river too. Like you talked about, you kind of got into, I know how long I'm going to be in the boat. I know how I'm going to camp. I know where my stuff goes. And life kind of simplifies down to the basics. And it's just refreshing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And even if it's your local walkway that maybe you've walked up 100 times, if you get in a canoe or kayak, you'll get on it, you'll see it from a different viewpoint. And you'll see different things. You'll see different animals. It's very quiet. It can be a pretty nice way to travel and see the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of my favorite things, and I've said this on the show before, but when you're in a boat and you drift by the animals, they're not alarmed. They're used to humans walking, So when you come in a boat and kind of drift by, you can go right by them. And they just kind of look at you like, hey, that's interesting. What is that? Yeah. It's a beautiful way to encounter the wildlife.
Yeah, I've always found that strange. They seem to not see you as the same kind of threat as they would if you were on the side or walking around. So I've had otters pretty close to my kayak and stuff, and so it's not just the whitewater; it's the landscapes, it's the people, and definitely I love seeing the wildlife out there.
Very, very cool. Well, Liam, it's been awesome to hear about your experience kayaking, and especially kayaking the Grand Canyon solo in winter. Man, it sounds like such a cool trip. I would like to get my skill set up enough to actually do that one, because that just seems like the granddaddy to me. Like you said, it kind of got stuck in your head, and it's like, whoa, that's the one I've got to do. I think that would be such an amazing thing. Congratulations that you won the lottery and that you got to do it and had the experience. I guess in parting, one last question. I believe that big adventures like this, we set a big goal, we work toward it, we do all the planning, the logistics, everything else. We build a skill set, we gain the confidence, and then we do it. It changes us somehow. Yeah. So how would you say that this experience changed Liam?
I definitely feel a lot more sort of can do, and in a literal sense, not in a sort of happy, chirpy, can do kind of way. I feel like a lot more things are possible than maybe I realized. And even if they don't seem possible to start, just start working towards it. Like I wasn't sure how I was going to get all my kit in my boat, or if there was a boat I could even rent out there. But once I started putting it in progress, it all started working out. Once it looked like a big mission, but once I started breaking it down and started it, it all kind of unfolded and happened. And I've sort of applied that to a lot of other things now. Just starting it, even if I don't know how it's going to end up or work out, and just starting it. Don't just think about it.
How can people get more information? Is there a way that they can see pictures or videos or something about your trip?
Like I had a Facebook page when I was starting it about all the planning, and that was called Project 30, which you can find. And it's got some photos, and there's a link to the video I made about the trip in there. And the reason it was called Project 30 is because when it was all a pipe dream and I was thinking about it, it was coming up to my 30th birthday, and I thought I want to do something for my 30th. So I just kind of dubbed it Project 30, but it turned into a Grand Canyon solo trip. But if you look for that, you'll find videos and photos, and you can ask me about how to plan this trip or what kit that you need and stuff like that on there.
On Facebook, Project 30.
Yeah, Project 30 on Facebook, yeah. Okay. And the Ecuador thing is I work for a company called Small World Adventures. And if you're interested in kayaking in Ecuador, check out Small World Adventures. And like I said, they've been there since 1993. So when I was a nipper, starting kayaking out there, and they wrote the guidebook. And if you want 7 days good kayaking out there, they're the people to get in touch with.
Very cool. Well, we can put links to that stuff on our website. So listeners, if you want to get more information, then just go to adventuresportspodcast.com, and we'll have some links for this stuff. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing it with us, man. I really enjoyed hearing about it. What a cool trip.
Thanks so much.
You bet. And for all of our listeners out there, hey, whitewater kayaking, it may be creek boating, maybe you just like going down a gentle river. Maybe it's the Grand Canyon in the wintertime. But whatever it is, there's another adventure sport. It's delightful. It's just an awesome sport. So until the next show, make sure that you do get out there and have some fun.
Coming up on Thursday's episode, we're going to talk about cycling around the world in 78 days with Mark Beaumont. Until then, get out and have some fun. Why don't you do yourself and us a favor and become a member of our Facebook group. In there, you can hear about some awesome adventures, learn how to do new ones, and share what you've been up to. And while you're on the web, do us a favor and go over to patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast and consider becoming a patron to help the show. You can also find a link to Patreon at the top of our website at adventuresportspodcast.com. As always, thanks for listening, guys.